Greetings and welcome, everybody, to this week's episode of UC Weekly News. I'm your host, as always, David Danto, and I got my friend Joe A on with me. Joe, say hi to everybody.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. It's always an honor to join you.
And Joe, remind people if they don't know, if they don't know you, they've been under a rock. But give everybody, you're at UCLA. What are your titles? What are you doing with HETMA? What are you doing nowadays?
Well, you maybe people don't know, even though it has been a year that I've been at UCLA. It doesn't feel like it, but it's now coming up on a year, which is just crazy. So yeah, I am the executive director at digital spaces at UCLA. Greatest title ever. Tells you nothing about what I do. Basically, that just means that I oversee all of our spaces across the enterprise, whether they be classrooms, conference rooms, digital signage, our live event spaces, our conference buildings, all of our four campuses, et cetera, our virtual spaces and all of that. And there's probably a lot. Oh, our live streaming service. There's other stuff in there. So I oversee all the teams that do that across the enterprise, also in a few years. So that'll be fun. And then also with Hetma, I am stepped down from the chair position, so it's fantastic. So I am now just co-founder, no longer just co-founder and chair, but still active and on the board and everything, of course. And so I get a great opportunity to just relax, sit back, let the organization take form on its own, and run our golf tournament we're doing in 4 weeks. So there we go. That's going to be a fun. There's my fun. I can do it for fun now.
Awesome. That's terrific. So I know you want to sit back and relax, but I'm kind of not going to let you today because I'm putting quite a bit of weight on your shoulders. There have been a number of debates online, some things that I, brought up, some topics that I wanted, and a lot of people are saying they don't understand how the end user feels. So I'm making you represent all of the end users,
I will
mostly
represent them
mostly
all of
because
them.
you're willing to. There are a number of other people at some very large enterprises that said, geez, Dave, I'd really love to talk to you, but I can't get permission. So, and you know who you are. But I did want to have a chat with you. And you don't have to echo my opinions just because you're a guest on the show. Lord knows we're good friends and we disagree about many things anyway. But why don't we take these on one at a time and see how you feel? So the first question that I had was this concept of white labeling, which is if you're buying and you're responsible for choosing and buying a lot of AV products over the course of what you do in all the various entities you work with. And I think that buying a product from a company with a reputation is important. And I would think you would agree with that. You want to make sure you
Yes.
have a relationship with them, that they know what they're doing, whatever. There are companies out there now that are starting to make products that they don't have any skill set in. And in some cases, and we were talking before we started recording, who's manufacturing the components for them, and you have a trust factor there. But in many cases, especially companies that are using an ODM and just white labeling the product, they've had no say in how it's built. They went to this other company and said, "Make me a car, or make me a video conferencing bar, or make me a sound mixer," and they got it in, and they slapped their label on it and said, "Look, we now have a video bar," and from my end user days, that kind of stuff bothered me, but I'm not sure how you feel about that. What's your take on that space?
Yeah, I got multiple thoughts on it. Like my first instinct is, okay, so what? Right? Because in the end, it's the company I'm buying it for who's responsible for it, whether it works or not, right? And if it goes south and it doesn't work, I'm going back to X big name that threw their name on it, not the company that made it somewhere in Shenzhen or something along those lines, right? I'm going to them. They're the ones responsible, and it's their reputation on the line to me if they want to keep me as a customer to make sure that's right. Flip side, I do tend to agree with you though that hey, if you do great, great microphones and you do great speakers and you do great cameras, stick to that. If you do great control systems, stick to that. And I don't mind buying pieces of this or that to have the right things. So I do believe that the market is getting saturated with companies that want to do everything. And I get it, right? Business model is keep everybody in our little ecosystem, keep everybody in the chain of our family. And if they're already kind of buying a this, why don't we match it with a that because they're gonna do it? So I get it. Um, so yeah, how was that for a long no answer? That was a
Well,
yes and a no. I see both. I see both sides. And in the end, though, I don't know where. I mean, I do know where people make things, but if you're gonna go third party out something or you're gonna OEM whatever, you're still the one responsible. And if I think your product is crap because you didn't do it yourself, you didn't do the standard of all the other products I buy from you because I came to trust you based on those product line, it only hurts you if you don't deliver something at the quality expected. Um, but that said, I tend to use companies that do the right, if you're if I'm looking for a microphone, I'm going to a trusted microphone company. If you do cameras, I'm going to a trusted camera company, right? And displays, the same thing. So that's, but I get it. I get
Well,
it. And it,
let's clarify. Let's assume, which is probably not true, but let's assume that whatever the product is, it works. That there's no question about the fact that you press the button, the light comes on, and it does whatever it's supposed to do. Let's assume that even if the company that's not doing any of it but slapping their label on it, plug the damn thing in and see if the thing works. So I'm not talking about the fly by night stuff. I'm talking about well built items.
yeah.
When you buy it, if you know it's not being made from the company by the company or engineered by the company you're buying it from, do you want to evaluate the quality of the company that's engineering and manufacturing it? And I'm not saying they should do it or they shouldn't do it. I'm saying as a buyer, should you know? Is that something that should be in the information they provide to you as opposed to it being a mystery?
Oh, oh gosh. See, I'm still here's the thing. My instinct wants to say yes to you. It does. I feel like,
Oh, I
oh
don't want
yes,
you
of
to agree
course.
with me just to
No,
agree with me.
well, because you set it up right. You set it up to go, don't you want to know? And it's like, yes, of course I want to know. But then I sit there and go, but do I care? Here's what I do care about. I do care. Does that company that they're using, how do they manufacture their chips, right? Are they sustainable? Are they killing our environment in doing so, right? What are other practices that maybe by outsourcing that aren't being watched as much? Because if you're already going with the assumption it's going to work, then why do I care, right? I don't. Um, and I don't know. I just make the assumption, right or wrong, that companies that are the, let's call them the A class of companies, are already going to vet these things themselves, right? I would hope, and I probably am very wrong on this, that they wouldn't want to ruin their own reputations by not doing their own, you know, uh, due diligence when finding somebody else to manufacture for them. I'm
Okay.
probably way wrong on that, but I
Yeah,
would hope that.
I think there are a number of considerations. That you'd need to think about. And I'm assuming that you would think about it. You would think about how are you going to manage these devices on your network. So
Yes,
if you're using a management system from whoever you're buying your video products from, and now the company that you had been buying your speakers from now has a video product, will it work with the management system that you're using? And if it doesn't,
absolutely.
so but again, to me it comes down to if I'm buying one of something, I don't care. If I'm buying two of them, fine. It's going to be those two rooms. Let's see how they work over the next, year, 2 years. Let's see what the longevity is. And if they don't work really well, fine. I got some other spares over here. We'll swap them out quickly. If I'm buying 100 of something or 1,000 of something, I want to know what the quality and the
Yeah,
conditions are in the factory, and if the chips are meeting the federal regulations. Are they chips that are allowed to be purchased and sold in the U.S. and it's I kind of want to know that. and
yeah,
and and your point, which I completely agree with, is would it affect my decision if there were no skeletons? It wouldn't affect my decision, but if it's being hidden from me, why?
yeah.
Why would you say we make microphones and now we're buying our video products from this company and here, take a look at the factory? I kind of want to know that.
Yeah, yeah, no, I do agree with you there. And I think when you do start looking at scale, I mean, this is also where I'm not gonna buy 100 of something unless it fills, my requirements, right? It would have to fall under my management platform. It would have to be able to be serviceable. It would have to pass our network vulnerability test, right? I mean, these are all things that would automatically, And it wouldn't matter if you were making it, you were outsourcing that or you were doing it yourself. Like those are all requirements, period, that would have to be vetted no matter what, right? So, and again, and I would even say not even just the onesies, twosies. I say in general, if you're going to go on my production network, you better pass everything because it's the onesies, twosies are the ones where your vulnerability is going to be found. You know, all they got to get in is they got one, all they have to have is one point of entry into my backbone and doesn't matter, right? So I think it's equal no matter what that I'm going to have to vet and make sure it falls under whatever our requirements and our standards are for sure, for sure. Yeah, no, I definitely agree, and I think it in the end as we started to talk about it more, and it's kind of been out there, and you know, it's one of those. I believe you're right in the sense of at least be transparent, right? At least be transparent. Do I actually care? Probably not, but at least be transparent.
Okay, so we agree at that point is that
Yeah.
there's no need for the subterfuge, especially, I use an iPhone. An iPhone is made by Foxconn in China. It doesn't mean I think of Apple any less or any more for that reason. It's just I know because I deserve to know. I
Yeah.
deserve to know that that there are people not committing suicides in the plant anymore, and it's not child labor and things. So, all right, so we
Absolutely.
agree on that one. So I'm glad. I appreciate your viewpoint. Not everybody shares that viewpoint. More than happy to hear from anybody who wants to come on and give agreement or disagreement to those points. Everybody is welcome to come and chat about it. And I have a number of threads on LinkedIn that you can always join to talk about that as well, or just message me. So then the next point that I made that was a bit controversial was the idea of what's going on with microphones. Now, you're a student of AV. I'm a student of AV for many years, and we understand sound waves and sound pressure level, SPL, and all the other sciences around it. And ultimately, the science is that if you put a microphone next to somebody's mouth, it sounds good, and the further away it goes, the worse it sounds. That's just the nature of sound and sound waves and how they work. And the further
Math.
away they go, the more waves and other things can interfere with it and whatever. So we've always had a problem. I was building conference rooms before you were in the business, and the ideal way to build them is with long gooseneck microphones that are just an inch or two away from the people talking. And what they became was breakables. People would bat them around and move them aside, move them out of the way, and rip them off the table. They'd break once a month, and you'd have to keep replacing them. So that didn't work. So then we put little button microphones on the table, and that didn't work because then you open up a piece of paper and it sounds like you got thunder showers, going by and noise. So that didn't work. So then we put short shotguns, little twiddle microphones on the table, and that's what they turned out to be. They were, the first fidget spinners, twiddle sticks. People would snap them off all the time. So ultimately, we came down to a couple of solutions. When I was around, we were doing large, heavy microphones down the center of the table that were hypercardioid. Nowadays, what you do is you put a ceiling tile microphone in the room, ceiling arrays that do a pretty decent job picking up sound, and sometimes they double as speakers as well. And it produces some really good sound, and it's a bear to put them in many cases because it's a lot of stuff in the ceiling of a conference room. There's sprinkler heads, there's HVAC ducts, there's lighting, there's power. Now you got to bring network up there for PoE. You've got, probably the fire alarm and other things. And what was happening was you were getting in the way of the architectural design of the room. It had to be very tightly coordinated. And I remember good friend of mine that does audio was telling me about how he went to one of the large banks, and the architect was telling him, "Oh, don't worry about it. We reserved a space for you in the back corner of the room ceiling called the tech zone, and that's where you put your microphone." And it's like, it doesn't work back there. It's got anyway. What I've heard from Neat and a few other companies making video conferencing now is they're stacking AI audio algorithms on, and you take a microphone that array that just sits on the table in the front of a room, and you fire up these stacked AI algorithms. All of a sudden, it sounds like you got the hand mic in front of your mouth again. So I'm asking myself if that's where this technology is going with sound cleaning and the various couple of dozen AI algorithms, who's going to deal with the coordination up in the ceiling? Ultimately, maybe I'm just going to put some in the front of the room and maybe on the side wall of the room and let AI clean it up, and I don't have to worry about the coordination. And a lot of people got offended by that. And one of the things that's interesting about AV, I wrote a paper, you'll see it come out in a little while, is we are so dramatically changing the technology on a constant basis, yet we're so resistant to change. We hate it when something new
Mhm.
happens. We want to stick with the old, myself included. So, having given that long speech, where are you on the concept of what's going on with AI and audio algorithms and ceiling microphones?
Yeah, to me, it's the best thing that has happened to audio, especially in a classroom setup. All of them are out there. I mean, I can think all of the major players are doing incredibly good work. Incredibly good work. Every single time I test a new solution, it outperforms what I expect it to do. Um, and that just kudos to all the top players out there. And
You can name names. It's okay.
no,
Nobody.
I mean whether I mean if you take the Sennheiser TCC2 and you take the Shure 902, you take Nereva, if you take the Yamaha, I mean they're all four that are fantastic at what they do. They really are, right? And you've got different, right? You got that you take Nereva, you got it on a wall, right? And you got the others, they're in the ceiling, right? I mean, um, and I think that you really can't go wrong with the way, and again it's like they're taking the technology and then using the let's call it quote unquote AI. They're using they're manipulating the sound wave to make it sound right. And kudos to them, because I look at like the classroom situation, right? I'll say, let me back up a little bit. I'm not so concerned about, hey, what's the infrastructure to throw a ceiling mic up there and get in there. Half the classrooms are drop ceilings anyway. I'm running up like most of the time, unless I have a historic building, it is not an issue. So, I'm going to throw an asterisk to go 95% of the time. It doesn't matter whether I go wall, I go front of table, whether I do, one that's built into an all-in-one display, a need or a detail. You know what I mean? It doesn't, in most of the time there's a solution that is easy to do for the space that I'm doing it, right? Outside of historic buildings where I gotta be careful, right? Um, but I sit there and go, look, I think the day of the microphone sitting on a table is dead and should be dead. I get certain use cases, absolutely. But I think the way that they have worked, and I've seen a lot of them where, when you are now able to do exclusion zones, right? And you can take the ruffling of a bag of potato chips opening up is now out, and you're not catching that. These algorithms are smart enough to just capture the voice itself. Is really impressive. And I think from a classroom design perspective, it makes it a no. I don't know why I just thumbs up everybody on the video. There you go. It makes it really, really easy to design um, and install, right? Because now I'm handling everything within a software, right? It's get it up there, get it in the optimal position. Um, I do think that there's a sense where, I'm going to go to your example of throwing something in the front of the room. We're not yet to the point, where you're going to get equal sound, right? The person in the back, if you've got, that executive conference room that's, 10 seats long and you're just throwing the all-in-one display or the sound bar, the microphone array at the front, we're not quite to the point where you're going to get them equal from the front to the back person. But there are good solutions where you can do multiples, right? Like you said, along the sides or things like that. But I look at the ease of install. I also look at the taking away from the user having to do anything. And that's what, that was your example, right? How many times you got to hit, sure, you put the microphone on the table where you got to hit the little button. Well, now you got to hit the button, and someone's got to then remind people you need to hit the button, right? And then you've got the next, the ruffling of paper, all the things that you said that now we can get rid of. And it's just the microphone works. We just put a ceiling mic in just the office of our vice chancellor. And because he was just saying he was having a hard time, he has an all-in-one display, but it just wasn't quite right, because sometimes he moves to the table near the all-in-one display. Sometimes he takes the meeting back from his desk that's toward the back wall. One central ceiling microphone fixed all of that, and he it's compliment after compliment that he gets, and that is really, and that to me is the best thing. That it just, I know I'm starting to talk in circles. I'm making your your really short question a very long answer. But
Never
yeah.
criticize you for what you're saying. You know, your point of view is the reason why you're on here today, and that's certainly very appreciated. I'm thinking the only case that you're not accounting for, and I perfectly accept everything and agree with everything that you're saying. The only case you're not counting for is you're not counting for the medium, even to large enterprise that is not building new rooms, but is adding technology to the existing rooms. We've been talking in the collaboration space about how many millions of rooms aren't equipped for video, even post-pandemic. And the numbers that have been bandied about, I don't believe. I think the numbers are too high. But even on the conservative side, there are a hell of a lot of meeting rooms in the world right now that don't have equipment, that aren't equipped for video, that need to be equipped for video. And I'm just thinking that if the choice is hire an AV integrator, hire an electrician, hire a general contractor to deal with the ceiling tiles coming in and out, maybe having to bring in an HVAC person, get around a duct, maybe a sprinkler. I don't know, the general contractor's world is there. That if I could drop something on the front of a credenza, like maybe a flat panel, well, on a couple of legs, and one of the high quality video bars mounted below it or above it or whatever's closer to eye level, and I can get 95% of the same quality sound with the stacked AI than I would if I have to
Oh,
bring in the contractors. That's a no-brainer.
yeah.
That's
No,
why wouldn't I just buy it and drop it in the room?
I will tell you that was what I was while I was at my former institution, and what we did and what we're doing at UCLA is, to me, any conference room or a seminar style room, you drop a D10 or a neat board right in the front of the room and call it a day. You're out. You're hanging it, you're plugging it in and plugging network into it. And, in fact, you don't even need network. Just get Wi-Fi if you've got strong enough Wi-Fi, and you're done, right? I totally agree with that. Up to a certain size, it makes sense. Um, and that, kind of what the magic number is. I mean, I think if you're talking 12, 14, anything lower than that it becomes a no-brainer.
Well,
You
let's
throw it in there,
let's
and
think
they're good. They're really good too.
let's think about what we're saying now. And there are some larger AV manufacturing component companies that now have a button that you press on their mixers that all of a sudden make the room sound right. They do all that designing that used to bring in an acoustical engineer to do. Um, and I'm a visual thinker, so forgive me, but I'm sure you'll come along with this. If we think of a scale from say 0 to 10, okay, and 0 and 1 is just like a little two-seat huddle room, and let's say 10 is a 10,000 person auditorium with a top table and a board and cameras and everything else. That slider, what you can just buy and drop into the room versus what you really need to bring in, maybe a consultant, maybe an AV, integrator, maybe some combination of both. I would say for most of my career, that slider was around 2. Once it gets past 2, you've really got to bring in an expert. I would say in the last 10 years, that slider has inched its way up to like 5. And I would say right now it's hovering around 7.
Mm,
In that, yes, the complex rooms need more talent, more integration, more design, more skill and experience. But how do we define a complex room versus a simple room? Or to say that another way, wouldn't a 14 seat room, six seats aside and one in front and one in the back, wouldn't we have considered that a complex integrated room 5 or 10 years ago? And now we consider it a drop in room.
yeah.
So that's
It
where we
and it
place
is
the
it
sliders,
100
the question.
100% agree. It is good. And I think it's only getting more. Watch me do some magic and go full circle to the opening of our conversation, where you were saying about companies making products that they don't necessarily normally isn't their purview. Well, now we are getting these integrations. If you are using it, if you are using integrated thing, why not create those all-in-one, those easy drop-ins, the speakers with the microphone that can now, I mean, these rooms are getting more simple and more simple and more simple because it's the processing that's doing the magic, right? And you've just basically every single space that exists now is just a node on a network. That's it, right? The mic's a node, the speaker's a node, the display's a node. That's it. And we are getting down to it being that simple. And if you can now just have someone, an internal facilities team, or someone walk in and go, hey, I just need you to get this and that drop ceiling. I need you to, to literally hang and bang this display on this wall. This like, or as you mentioned, we can get, direct view. I think we talked about this before we hit record, so I won't go too. I'm going to go full, sir. But you direct view LED, right? You easy piece some of these things together. That they weigh nothing nowadays. You don't even need real backing much anymore. You should safety, but I'm saying you almost don't, right? So I'm sitting here thinking it's only getting more and more to where the value of that actual integration team in the space, you're absolutely right, the slider is moving, but then that just adds I mean, now you have to think it's the back end, it's the programmer, it's the people who are configuring, it's the people bringing it onto the remote management system. How are you going to support that, right? You're just moving the needs to a different column, right? Doesn't mean that it's not there. You're just moving it to a different space, and that space might be someone who's sitting halfway across the world, right? Who's just
Well,
sitting at a desk managing
I
it, right?
I spoke with Biamp in detail at, not to call out a vendor, but I might as well in this case. And there's nothing bad or good about it, but I spoke with them at Infocom, and they've got a button on their audio devices that sends out white noise, pink noise, whatever the spectrum is, to tune the room. The comment that I made to the gentleman from Biamp was, I'm sure most of the high-end audio designers and engineers and consultants hate that button, because that button is taking away work from them. They used to come in and do a room, and now they don't do it. Now you just hit a button and you're done. And his answer to me was, no, they love it, because what it does is it frees them up to work on the projects where they're really needed. And I
Mm-hmm.
thought that that was an interesting, perhaps naive, but an interesting perspective. I've always believed, going back to the days of sound structure, that there were five people who really understood how to program sound structure, and 100 companies selling it. So you do the math about how many qualified people there were really out there doing it. Good audio people are hard to find, but that's the world we live in right now. When I was working with the one of the new video bar devices that I was testing, in the middle of the night, it woke me up because it's timed at 2 or 3 a.m. in the morning to send out blasts of noise to make sure that the room is still equalized correctly. So, we are in that world now where these things are going to start taking care of themselves.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's a good thing too, by the way. Like, I know we're an industry of don't mess with what I'm comfortable with, but it is a good thing. It is a good thing. We just have to be smart to know where the business is moving to, what it's moving from.
And that's actually a really good point. That's one of the reasons why I'm at CES every year, where I'm still going to be yelling at you that you should be going to CES every year, because you see the emerging technologies that are not in our space at all yet.
Mhm.
And you start to figure out, wow, well, if we can do stacked algorithms for audio to make it sound good, no matter where the microphone is, that opens up a lot of possibilities as to where to put microphones. And if we can, take some of these other technologies that are coming out, it's an interesting world that we live in now, and getting used to change is what we should be at the forefront of. So I
Absolutely.
appreciate the comments. So any last words before we wrap this one up this week?
Um, Thank you for having me on. That is the last word. This was fun. I always enjoy chatting with you, because you challenge me in things, and we really get down to the nitty-gritty of things to think about. So I think that there's some important, and you really brought out that we're in a transformational time in our industry. We really are, and not to just throw away around the buzzwords of AI or all those things, but the fact is, our products are becoming better, they're becoming smarter, the way we're using them, the expectations of our customers, right? Those things are things we have to think about, and are impacting our industry, and we have to stay up on that. We have to stay aware of it. And you just can't. I mean, those who want to be successful now, I'll speak to all the integrators and manufacturer partners out there now. If you want to be relevant in the next few years, we have to be able to pay attention to this, because the
Pay
technology
attention and
only going.
be transparent. But we're smart people. We're not going to stop buying from you because you say, hey, we didn't have the skills to make this, so we went to these guys. That's okay. Just tell us who they are.
Hmm.
So yeah, I think we're both in line, in sync in most of that stuff, and it's a brave new world. It's going to be exciting going out there. Hopefully, we won't have the danger of the new world. We'll have just the excitement of all the changes that we're managing and monitoring. Tell people how they can get in touch with you if they want to speak with you.
You can find me at Josiah Way on all of the socials. Also happens to be the start of both of my UCLA and my HETMA emails. So there you go. You can find me at Josiah Way everywhere. And of course, visit HETMA_org on all the socials.
Terrific. Thank you very much. And thank you very much for watching us as you do every week. For everyone that is involved in this conversation and is growing and is dealing with all of these AV changes and transitions, stay with it. You know, it's worth the change. It's worth adapting. It's worth learning things that are new. We appreciate you watching. We'll see you next week.